Uh, Today we'll be talking about many-to-many relationship in Laravel. So, to understand about many-to-many relationship, let's take an example of user and their roles, right? So, what happens in many-to-many relationship is actually one user can have many roles, and also one role can have many user. For example, user 1 can be both admin and manager, and admin can be both user 1 and user 2, right? And also manager can also be user 1 and user 2. Now, the difference between many-to-many and one-to-many relationship is that in one-to-many relationship, one user can have many roles, but one role can't have many users. For example, in user 1 can be both admin and manager, but admin can't be other user rather than user 1. For example, user 2 can't be admin or manager if user 1 is already admin or manager. That's the difference between one-to-many and a many-to-many relationship. One user can have multiple roles, but one role can have multiple users in one-to-many relationship. Whereas in many-to-many relationship, one user can have multiple roles, and also one role can have multiple users. So in this tutorial, what we're gonna do is we're gonna assign different roles for different users, right? So for that, we need to have the table. First, we need to create roles table. I have already created the roles table in our database. You can just create a migration file called create roles migration and add a column name role. So this is what it looks in the database. So if I go to our roles table, we have ID and then role, right? Which is a string as we have seen in the migration file. And the other table we need to add is pivot. We call it as a pivot table, which contains the relationship between role and the user. We need to create a new table called role user table, and which has ID and user ID and role ID as columns, right? Which should be a foreign key that that links to our ID of the user table in case of user ID, and user role ID actually binds ID in our roles table, right? So you just need to have a migration. This is what looks in our user role table. We have ID and user ID and role ID. For now, I'm gonna delete all of these different entries. If I look into the structure, now this user ID is actually a foreign key that is linked to the user's table. And role ID is also a foreign key that is linked to roles table, right? So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the relationship in our user model and role model. For that, we need to create role model first. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just giving the path for the PSP, but in your case, I think PSP Artisan should work just fine. Make model, and then I'm gonna give the name of the model. In our case, it's role model, right? Now we have role model inside app/models folder. Role can have multiple users, so I'm gonna create a function called users, and we're gonna have the relationship that is belongs to many, and then I'm gonna give the path of the user class, right? Similar goes to our user folder as well. I'm gonna define this many-to-many relationship, roles, and it returns belongs to many. And I'm gonna give the path of the role class, right? So this is how we actually define the relationship in the model. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a route that actually I'm gonna create a route that actually gives us the view with the help of which we can assign the role to our authenticated user. So for that, let me just quickly create a controller that is role controller. Right? All right. Now I'm gonna give the route that is the URL should be roles, and then I'm gonna define this function called create because we're gonna create the role for the particular user. Inside this role controller, I'm gonna have a method called create. I'm gonna roles.create view. Let me go to our view and then let me create a new directory that is, I'm just gonna name it role. And also in the controller, I'm gonna give role instead of roles. And inside this role folder, I'm gonna have a new file that is create. Now inside this create file, I'm gonna have a form and select statement and option. I'm gonna give the option as role, right? I'm going to list all of the role as options. This role, we get the roles from our roles table. If you look into this database, we already have this roles table, and please add different roles as you wish inside this role table. You can have this role inserted manually with the help of insert bar up here, right? Oops. We have manager, admin, and user as role currently in our database. And yeah, the column name is role, right? I'm gonna give the value as role ID and role we also need a button that says add role, and when we press this button, it will be redirected to our /post URL, which is our post request, and also I need to give the CSRF token up here. All right, and inside this role controller, I'm going to pass the roles. So role all, and here I'm going to pass the roles up here. All right, so this looks good. We have the roles as a route, and then it will go to our create method, and this roles fetches all of the roles from our table, and then it returns this view. Inside this view, we're gonna have the options of all the roles, right? Let's go to the browser and let's go to our roles table. Now we have the list of role in our dropdown, and also we have this button that says add role, right? Now what we're going to do is, now we're going to have the route for this post request, right? which actually stores the role for the user. So for that, let's just have this post route, and then role controller. I'm gonna define this method called store. Inside this role controller, I'm going to create a new function called store, and inside this request, I'm going to have request as an argument, and role ID should be request role because we have role as a name up here, and then auth user roles, we have a method called attach, and I'm going to attach role ID for our authenticated user, right? Let me just say something like stored. Oops. Let me refresh this page. And since we are using auth user, make sure that you have logged in as a certain user before assigning role to our auth user, because without logging it may give us the errors, something like roles, there is no user to have to access the roles, right? So now let me refresh this page, and I'm gonna assign the role of manager to our current user, I mean currently logged in user. So once I click this button, it says column title can't be null, insert into post. Sorry, let me go to our create the plate. Oh, it should be roles, not post, right? Let me go back. Let me refresh this page, and now I'm going to press add role. Now it says stored, right? Now if we go to our role user table, it says user ID 6, that is currently logged in user, has an role of manager, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have another role, for example admin for authenticated user. Now if I click on add role, it says user ID 6 also has role of 2, and authenticated user has role of manager and 2, that is our admin, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out, and oops, I'm going to log out of this currently user, and I'm going to register a new user that says manager user or whatever, due2, right? Due2. Oopsies. Now I'm going to register a new user that is due2, right? Now I'm going to go to our roles section, and I'm going to add a role of user for the due2. Also, I'm going to add manager for due2. Now if I go to our roles user table, user ID, which is due2, have a role of 3 and 1, that is it can have role of user and it can also have role of manager, right? So this is what basically many-to-many relationship is. One user can have multiple role, and the one role can have multiple users. In our case, we have role ID of 1. Manager can have user 6 and 7, and also user 6 can have user 1, and also user 6 can have role 2. So that's what basically many-to-many relationship is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to list all of the roles for our particular user. For, let's say, route get roles/list role controller index. Now inside our role controller, I'm going to create a new function called index. Now to access the roles of the user, I'm gonna access the roles with our auth user, right? So let me go and check the URL. It's roles/list, right? So if I go to our URL, it says this currently authenticated user has role of manager and also has user. So I think this is it for many-to-many relationship.